Chapter 377. Sensing the various gazes focusing on his fingertips, he touched the iron bars, and the monster made a small noise. A moment later, Pethumet slowly lowered its tail and approached in the direction where Yidr's hand was. The monster's reaction, sniffling at the iron bars as if smelling something, was the same as he had seen before. Yidr moved his hand to the opposite side. Then Pethumet also turned its head and followed his fingertips. Seeing this, Helem and Mick sighed simultaneously, like a sigh of admiration. It's amazing. It really responds. One who has the ability to read information told me that the monster felt either as an entity like itself. Kishir, who had quietly approached behind Yidr, gently pulled him away, so they were a bit farther from the cage. His attitude was so subtle that no one thought it was intrusive. What do you two think? Monsters move strictly according to instinct. This following reaction is undoubtedly the response of finding the same kind. Monsters that move in group have a strong tendency to follow the direction of the one in front. Helem opened her mouth. She had certainly done extensive monster research for a long time and was much more knowledgeable than the mages of the Western Mage Union, not being astonished by the surprising phenomenon. According to my research, monsters react sensitively in various ways to the same species' bodily fluid. It's not strange that they recognize it as the same species if someone had absorbed toxic fluid. Helem added that it was fortunate that Pethumet had the habit of moving in groups. If it had been a monster that showed hostility when meeting the same kind, this might have tried to attack either specifically. Hearing this, Kishir opened his mouth with a chilly smile. Yeah, if that had happened, maybe you wouldn't have come this far. Following Helem, Mick also began to share his thoughts. I think the same as Grandma. Many believe in the myth that objects made from the monster byproducts block monster attacks. There are actual cases of people mysteriously avoiding attacks. In that sense, this may be unfamiliar, but it seems possible. Though not often recorded in history, Mick presented a few examples that he knew, which were definitely existing cases. I can't guarantee whether this phenomenon will persist after the body heals, but in my opinion, even if you kill this monster right now, it doesn't seem like it would be very detrimental to your Sir Ailes' physical condition or remaining injuries. What do you think, Grandma? I think the same. The conclusion was quickly reached, but even afterward, Mick's deep blue eyes remained fixed on Yidr for a while. It was a gaze that seemed similar to curiosity, yet different. Something looks like peering inside. Unintentionally meeting the gaze for a moment, Yidr suddenly felt a familiar energy. It was a fleeting sensation, weak enough to be mistaken as an illusion, like the aura that awakeners emit with using power. Yet, Yidr felt it was faintly from Mick before it disappeared. Yidr trusted his senses. Was Mick Shuden an awakener? He had never heard in his previous life that the head of the Shuden family was an awakener. He wanted to ask, but Mick was quicker to open his mouth toward Kishir. So, Your Highness, now that you have heard our opinions, what will you do? Yidr silently looked up at Kishir's pale cheek, lost in thought. The deeper shadow of his long eyelashes on his cheek seemed to be contemplating whether to kill Pethumet right away or not. But moments later, the red eyes that were gazing at Pethumet's cage unexpectedly turned to Yidr. Yes, now that we have concluded there is no remedy, there will be no problem with disposing of it. But weren't you assisting because you wanted to find out something more from it? Suddenly, the arrow was aimed at him. Yidr was inwardly perplexed, but slowly opened his mouth. How did you know? Because it's not in your character to say to dispose of it only after being certain, unless there is something else. Such quick wits, while remaining quiet up until now, were truly characteristic of Kishir. It was a snake-like facet, one he hadn't felt in a while. Enon's eyes, not far away, subtly changed, turning into a look that seemed to desperately want to pry into something. But Yudir avoided that gaze and opened his mouth. Well, yes, I did think that I wanted to find out in more detail how the power of that monster is exerted, but I wanted to tell you that I also oppose disposing of it right away for other reasons. What reason is that? Anon had been thinking about it while observing the monster. Either said, speaking for Anon, that monster has the ability to absorb magic power through toxic fluids, and he speculated that I might be able to utilize the same ability since I have absorbed it. To go into more detail, the power of the red stone absorbed by Uther would probably be related, but he decided not to talk about that here. If I can find a way to absorb the toxicity that doesn't completely disappear from my body rather than forcibly removing it, I think it would be good as I can also find out what I want. Does that mean you intend to activate the remaining toxicity in your body? Helm carefully asked. Then Anon, who had been stepping back until now, took a step forward and replied. The remaining toxicity is small, but I judged it to be the state where it cannot be forcibly removed even with divine power because it has become excessively adapted to the body. Detoxifying poison means adapting it to the body. Since the guy has recovered a lot of energy and is strong enough to withstand the remaining toxicity with his original power, isn't it worth a try? To do that, you will have to use the monster's blood. Is that what you have thought about and said? Enor nodded at Helm. Anyway, the reason that monster was dangerous wasn't the toxicity itself, but the strange amplification circle created by the Western mages. If he had been covered with the blood of a monster who hadn't swallowed the amplification, I would have been able to get rid of it before it was absorbed into his body. But reality hadn't turned out that way, so Anon suggested discussing this method by taking on a slight risk. Either thought the method was quite reasonable, but they needed to hear the opinions of experts, including the mages, to implement it. This is a solution I haven't thought of at all. Mick stroked his lips slowly, showing a subtle smile. But since it's an unprecedented challenge to remove the toxicity that couldn't be completely eradicated even with magic and has fully attached to the body, perhaps we should try to that extent. Grandmother, what do you think? It could be dangerous, Helm answered in a heartbeat. Yes, it may be dangerous, but it's not impossible, and the one who knows and can handle that level of danger best is the grandmother. If the assistant must live the rest of his life with one blind eye, I think His Highness will be greatly disappointed. Why not give it a try? Helm did not respond easily. Yudhir subtly intervened between them. If you don't feel like it, that's fine. I'm grateful enough for you coming here and taking a look. It was a sincere remark, but Helm looked at Yudhir with an exceedingly pitiful expression. After examining Yudhir's left eye, she sighed and eventually nodded her head. All right, I understand. Will you help too? If it's something I can do, I'll certainly help, Mick answered coolly, squinting his eyes. That's why we came here in the first place. Besides, with the pharmacist there, we might finish sooner than expected. He doesn't seem to have an ordinary mind. ... Lines deepened on Anon's brow, but he did not spit out words of refusal to participate. So, this is our opinion. Now it's up to His Highness to decide. Hearing Mick's words, Kishir's gaze turned towards Yudhir. Without words being exchanged, it was clear what he was saying. Instead of answering, Yudhir faintly nodded. Emotions that had briefly flickered in Kishir's red pupils were quickly gathered and disappeared. Composing his feelings, he returned to his usual decisive countenance, akin to that of Duke Paleta. Helm, if you are to take responsibility for this part, how much time and manpower will be needed. I need no more manpower. More people won't necessarily be better for this job, don't you know? As for preparations, it will be over with just one monster. And of course, either the subject would also be needed. Anyway, I will attempt it, concerned about the bright future of this young man you have bought. If it seems too dangerous, I will withdraw. That's why I trust you, head mage. When did I retire that you still call me that? Wouldn't it be better to call me former head mage? Even if you have forsaken your title, your achievements haven't disappeared, have they? If we are to embark on this journey, it's only fair that others know more about who you are. No one beats you in words, my lord. Helen clicked her tongue, glancing at Ydir and Anon. Still, she seemed to agree with Kishir's words, introducing herself properly once again. I was once called Helen Castrel, but since retiring, I have given up both title and surname, and now I'm simply Mage Helen. Ydir was secretly very surprised. Not just a court mage, but the former head mage.